Beheads Bigfoot. Chapter 9. Holy mackerel. It was past midnight. Sierra and Jimmy were in the woods looking for Johnny. Man, he had to go and use the bathroom in the woods, Sierra replied, annoyed. The woods scare me, Jimmy replied nervously.
Doyle.
This is an example of speech synthesis. Beheads Bigfoot. Chapter 9. Holy mackerel. It was past midnight. Sierra and Jimmy were in the woods looking for Johnny. Man, he had to go and use the bathroom in the woods, Sierra replied, annoyed. The woods scare me, Jimmy replied nervously. Don't worry, Jimmy. As long as I'm with you, nothing can hurt you, Sierra replied softly. Suddenly, they began to hear loud footsteps in the woods. They stood still in fear. What is that? Sierra asked worriedly. Jimmy began to shake in fear. Then they began to hear growling. Jimmy jumped in fear. Jimmy started running frantically. Jimmy, wait, Sierra shouted panically. Jimmy was running through the woods while looking over his shoulders. Suddenly, Jimmy tripped over something. On my legs, Jimmy moaned in pain. Jimmy was on the ground. Sierra, where are you? Jimmy shouted panically. Jimmy stood up from the ground. Jimmy turned around and saw Sierra. Jimmy noticed something wrong with Sierra. Sierra, are you all right? Jimmy asked nervously. Sierra's eyes were looking at the ground, paralyzed with fear. Jimmy looked at the ground. Jimmy screamed bloody horror. On the ground in front of Jimmy's feet was Johnny. He was completely bloodied up, his shirt was ripped to shreds, his arms and legs were broken with bones sticking out, and his best friend, Plank, was sticking out of Johnny's mouth with blood spilling out. Holy mackerel, Jimmy shouted panically. Oh my God, John, Sierra shouted panically while crying. Sierra and Jimmy started running back to the camping site. Did that really just happen? Jimmy shouted panically while crying. Jimmy, listen. When we get back to the camping site, we are packing up our things, and we were leaving, Sierra shouted panically. Suddenly, Sierra and Jimmy bumped into something. They were knocked to the ground. They looked up. They saw an 11-foot tall shadowed creature. Sierra and Jimmy screamed bloody horror.